The moment Flight 863 started dropping from the sky, nobody paid attention to the quiet woman in row 27. As oxygen masks dangled and passengers screamed, flight attendant Octavia noticed something strange. While everyone panicked, this passenger was calculating. When both pilots lost consciousness and the aircraft began its deadly descent, Octavia fought her way down the aisle and whispered 7 words that changed everything. "You're Phoenix, aren't you?" From the Kandahar extraction. The woman's face revealed nothing, but her eyes said everything. Without a word, she stood and headed for the cockpit, moving against the lurching aircraft with impossible balance. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories about unsung heroes who walk among us, consider subscribing for more untold stories that remind us appearances can be deceiving. Trans-Pacific Flight 863 cruised at 37,000 feet, a silver needle threading through clouds tinged orange by the setting sun. Inside the Boeing 787, the constant hum of engines provided a soothing white noise to passengers settling in for the remaining 3 hours of their journey. Most had found their rhythm in the confined space, some sleeping, others watching movies on tiny screens, a few making conversation with seatmates who had been strangers 12 hours ago. Flight attendant Octavia Reeves moved through the cabin with practice efficiency, collecting trash from the dinner service. 11 hours into her shift, her smile remained professional, even as her lower back protested. She'd made this Tokyo to Honolulu run dozens of times before, and the faces tended to blur together after the first few hours. But row 27, seat C, caught her attention, though not for any obvious reason. The woman occupying it, perhaps mid to late 40s, seemed designed to blend into the background of any environment. Silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a simple knot, reading glasses perched on a nose that had been broken at least once. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, except a simple analog watch with a worn leather band. Nothing remarkable. Yet something about her registered differently to Octavia's trained eye. The woman, Mercer Calloway, according to the passenger manifest, had refused alcohol throughout the flight, requesting only water. While appearing absorbed in a dog-eared paperback, her eyes seemed to register every movement in the cabin. The way she sat, spine straight, but shoulders relaxed, conveyed a readiness that most passengers lacked after hours of confinement. "Another water, ma'am?" Octavia offered as she passed. "Thank you," Mercer replied, voice pleasant but neutral. American accent without regional specificity, another forgettable detail. As Octavia placed the water on the tray table, she noticed Mercer's hands, scarred knuckles, calluses in places you wouldn't expect on a typical office worker. Little signs most wouldn't register, but that spoke of a life more physically demanding than her current attire suggested. The businessman in 27A complained loudly about the intermittent Wi-Fi connection. His fourth such complaint of the flight. A college student in 27B slept with headphones blaring music loud enough that Octavia could identify the bass line. A family in row 28 debated excitedly about their upcoming Hawaiian vacation, the children's voices rising and falling as they argued about which beach to visit first. Through it all, Mercer simply read her book, occasionally glancing out the window where the vast Pacific stretched beneath them. Once when she thought no one was watching, her expression changed just for a moment as her eyes fixed on the horizon. Something distant passed across her features. Memory, perhaps. Her fingers twitched slightly on her armrest, as if remembering other controls, other skies. Octavia continued her work, but found her attention returning to the woman in 27C. In her 12 years as a flight attendant, she developed an intuition about passengers. The anxious ones, the entitled ones, the ones who would need extra attention. Mercer didn't fit any of the usual patterns. She made no demands, created no disturbances, yet maintained a self-contained alertness that felt almost professional. The first hint of turbulence came without warning, just enough to illuminate the seatbelt sign and cause a ripple of mild annoyance through the cabin. Passengers secured beverages. Flight attendants took their jump seats. The businessman in 27A white-knuckled his armrest, his complaint about Wi-Fi forgotten as the plane shuddered briefly. Mercer didn't even look up from her page. Captain Elias Thornton's voice came over the intercom. "Folks, we're hitting some expected rough air. Nothing to worry about, just a weather system will be clearing shortly. Please remain seated with your seat belts fastened." The turbulence subsided and the cabin returned to normal operations. Octavia resumed her duties, but caught herself watching row 27 again. Something about the passenger in seat C nagged at her subconscious. The way Mercer had tilted her head at the captain's announcement, not with anxiety, but assessment. The way her eyes had flicked to the overhead panels, then to the wing outside her window, like someone who knew aircraft really knew them. An hour later, dinner trays collected and cabin lights dimmed for those wanting to sleep. Octavia checked the weather radar in the galley. A massive system had developed seemingly out of nowhere directly in their path. Captain Thornton had already requested a course adjustment, but they would still skirt the edge of the storm front. The second round of turbulence hit harder than the first. The aircraft dropped suddenly, then stabilized. Drinks spilled. A few passengers gasped. The cabin lights flickered momentarily. First Officer Lachlan Wright's voice came over the intercom. This time, tension evident beneath his professional tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered some unexpected turbulence. The captain has. We're managing the situation. Please remain in your seats with seat belts securely fastened." Octavia exchanged glances with Senior Flight Attendant Desiree Blackwood. Something was wrong. The plane banked suddenly, too steeply for a normal course adjustment. "Did he just cut himself off?" Desiree whispered. Before Octavia could respond, the aircraft pitched forward without warning. This wasn't standard turbulence. The plane dropped what felt like several hundred feet in seconds. Oxygen masks deployed from the ceiling, dangling above terrified passengers. Warning lights flashed throughout the cabin. The recorded safety announcement began playing automatically. As Octavia braced against a seatback, her eyes met Mercer's across the cabin. The woman in row 27 wasn't panicking. She wasn't praying. She wasn't clutching her armrests. She was calculating. And in that moment, as the plane pitched forward again and passengers screamed around them, Octavia remembered where. She'd seen eyes like that before. 5 years ago, her brother Wyatt had returned from a deployment drinking too much whiskey on her back porch. He'd broken protocol. She knew that when he told her about a classified extraction in Kandahar, about how his special tactics squadron had been stranded. Mission compromised. All conventional extraction options denied. They sent one pilot, he'd said, his voice dropping to a whisper even though they were alone. When everyone else refused, combat conditions classified as unsurvivable. She came in a modified Black Hawk with half the instruments shot out, landed under heavy fire. Got 17 of us out when we were supposed to be written off. She, Octavia had asked. "Call sign Phoenix," Wyatt had replied. Never learned her real name, but I'll never forget her eyes like she was calculating survival odds with every movement. Human computer in a flight suit. The memory crystallized as the aircraft shuddered violently around them. Chaos erupted as the Boeing 787 dropped another 1,000 feet without warning. Passengers screamed. A child wailed. The businessman in 27A vomited into the air sickness bag. Through it all, Mercer Calloway remained still. An island of preternatural calm as the aircraft bucked and shuddered around her. The intercom crackled to life again. First Officer Wright's voice now openly panicked. "This is your first officer speaking. We're experiencing severe turbulence and a medical emergency in the cockpit. The captain is unresponsive. If there is a passenger with flight experience on board, please identify yourself to a crew member immediately." Desire's face went pale. "I'm going to check on them," she said, moving toward the cockpit with determined strides despite the lurching aircraft. Octavia looked back at Mercer, who remained focused, alert, still calculating. The recognition that had been building finally clicked into place. The hands, the posture, the awareness, the calm under pressure, the eyes that assessed everything. The plane dipped violently again. Someone screamed that they were going to die. A religious group in the back began praying loudly. A baby wailed, the sound piercing through the chaos. Octavia fought her way down the aisle to row 27, gripping seatbacks as the aircraft lurched. She leaned down to Mercer's ear, voice barely audible above the chaos. "You're Phoenix, aren't you? From the Kandahar extraction." My brother was there. For the first time, Mercer Calloway's perfect mask slipped. Her eyes widened, not with fear, but recognition that her cover was blown. She stared at Octavia, assessing this new variable in her calculations. "My brother is Wyatt Reeves, JTAC with the 24th Special Tactics Squadron. You saved him in 2017. The cockpit door opened. Desiree emerged, ashen-faced. The first officer just lost consciousness, too. Some kind of toxic fume event. I tried to stabilize the controls, but I don't know enough." The plane dropped again. Warning alarms sounded from the cockpit. "Both pilots are incapacitated," Octavia pressed, locking eyes with Mercer. "We're losing altitude." Mercer's jaw tightened. Her eyes darted to the cockpit door, then to the horizon, visible through the window, assessing angle of descent, banking degree, altitude. "Please," Octavia whispered. "There are families on board." Around them, the situation deteriorated. Passengers sobbed. The cabin pressure fluctuated painfully. Through the windows, the aircraft's severe bank was visible. Ocean where sky should be. "Ma'am, if you have any flight experience at all," Desiree called out desperately to the cabin at large. "Any at all, we need help now." Mercer drew a deep breath. She removed her reading glasses, folded them carefully, and placed them in her jacket pocket. When she looked up again, the carefully maintained civilian facade had vanished entirely. In its place was something else, the bearing of someone accustomed to command, to crisis, to impossible situations. "Get me to the cockpit," she said, her voice carrying an authority that cut through the chaos. Without another word, Mercer stood, removing her oxygen mask with practiced precision. She moved against the lurching aircraft with impossible balance, the way someone might walk on the deck of a ship in high seas, someone who had trained for it. "Who are you?" Desiree demanded as Mercer approached. Octavia answered for her. "She's our only chance." As Mercer disappeared into the cockpit, the plane banked again sharply. Octavia grabbed the nearest secure handhold, watching the door close behind the mysterious passenger from row 27. In that moment, despite the danger, Octavia felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. Because if the stories her brother told were true, if this was truly the pilot they called Phoenix, then everyone on board might just survive the next hour after all. Inside the cockpit, both pilots slumped in their seats. Captain Thornton was completely unconscious, his oxygen mask askew. First Officer Wright still showed signs of consciousness, eyelids fluttering weakly as he struggled to remain awake. Warning indicators illuminated the instrument panel, and the control yoke shuddered with each buffet of turbulence. Mercer assessed the situation in seconds, checking vital signs, securing oxygen masks properly on both men, then sliding into the captain's seat with fluid efficiency. Her hands moved across the controls with absolute certainty, not as someone with some flying experience, but as someone who had logged thousands of hours in aircraft far more complex than this commercial liner. She stabilized the pitch first, arresting their dangerous descent with careful adjustments to the control surfaces. Next, she corrected their course, bringing the wings level again. The altimeter stopped its alarming spin downward as she established a safe cruising altitude. Behind her, Desiree stood frozen in the cockpit doorway. "Can you fly this thing?" she asked, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Already am," Mercer replied without looking back, her attention focused entirely on the instrument panel. She reached for the radio with the confidence of someone who had made emergency calls before, many times before. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. Trans-Pacific 863 declaring emergency. Both pilots incapacitated. Aircraft under control of passenger pilot. Request immediate vectors for nearest suitable runway." The air traffic controller's response was immediate. "Trans-Pacific 863, copy your mayday. Identify pilot experience and certification." Mercer hesitated only briefly before responding. "Call sign Phoenix requesting emergency landing clearance." A long pause. Then Phoenix authentication code without hesitation. Sierra Tango 994, Whiskey Echo. Another pause. Stand by for fighter escort. Military Channel 7. Desire's eyes widened. Military channel on a civilian aircraft. Mercer didn't respond. Instead, she switched to a communication frequency that wasn't on the standard radio panel, accessing military channels that shouldn't exist on a commercial flight. Deck. She knew exactly where to find it, suggesting intimate familiarity with the aircraft's classified modifications. A new voice crackled through, sharp and authoritative. Phoenix, this is Raptor. We have visual contact coming alongside. You're supposed to be dead. Mercer's lips tightened in something almost like a smile. Reports greatly exaggerated. Raptor, I need runway clearance and emergency services at Quadrillion. Possible chemical agent on board. Both pilots down. Multiple passengers experiencing respiratory distress. Copy that, Phoenix. We're clearing your approach now. ETA 28 minutes at your current heading. Can you maintain control that long? Affirmative, Raptor, Mercer replied, eyes scanning the flickering instrument panel. Something in the electrical system was compromised. But we're experiencing system degradation. May need to go manual for final approach. Understood. We'll stay with you. Octavia appeared in the doorway, replacing Desiree, who had gone to attend to passengers. Fighter jets just pulled alongside us. Passengers are filming them. What's happening? We're being escorted to Quadrillion ATL, Mercer explained, making another adjustment as the aircraft shuddered. Military installation, with a runway that can handle this aircraft. 25 minutes out. Octavia stared at her. You really are Phoenix. Mercer's eyes never left the instruments. That information doesn't leave this aircraft. But my brother said you were killed in action 3 years ago. Something classified in Yemen. A muscle tightened in Mercer's jaw. As far as the world is concerned, I was. Now, I need you to prepare the cabin for an emergency landing. We're going to make it down, but it won't be pretty. Outside the cockpit windows, two F-22 Raptors had taken flanking positions, their pilots visible in their cockpits. One gave a deliberate salute when he caught Mercer's eye, a gesture of respect between aviators. I'll prepare the passengers, Octavia said, turning to leave. Wait, Mercer called. Check for anyone with medical training. The pilots were exposed to something. Might be spreading through the ventilation system. As Octavia left, Mercer focused entirely on flying. Despite her calm exterior, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The aircraft's fly-by-wire systems were becoming increasingly erratic, requiring constant manual corrections. The weather system they'd encountered wasn't natural. Its sudden appearance and electrical interference suggested something engineered. Someone had wanted this plane to go down. In the main cabin, chaos had transformed into an uneasy, terrified hush. The fighter escort had raised both hope and fear among the passengers. Phones recorded through windows as the military aircraft maintained their protective formation. Desiree used the intercom system. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a qualified pilot in command of the aircraft. We will be making an emergency landing at Quadrillion Atoll in approximately 20 minutes. Please listen carefully to all crew instructions and prepare for landing procedures. The businessman from 27A, still pale from being sick, looked up at Octavia as she passed. Who's flying a plane? He asked, his earlier complaints forgotten in the face of survival. Someone who knows what they're doing, Octavia replied, continuing through the cabin to organize the flight attendants for emergency procedures. In the cockpit, Mercer maintained steady communication with her fighter escort. Raptor lead. I'm seeing electrical system failures cascading. Primary navigation going intermittent. Copy that, Phoenix. We can guide you in visually if needed. Weather is clear at Quadrillion. Mercer's training took over completely. The thousands of hours in simulators, the hundreds of combat missions, the experimental aircraft she tested beyond their design limits. She became one with the struggling Boeing 787, feeling every vibration, anticipating each system failure before it happened. First Officer Wright stirred in the seat beside her, regaining partial consciousness. "What's happening?" he mumbled through his oxygen mask. "Saving your aircraft, Lieutenant," Mercer replied, using his former military rank without thinking. "Stay on oxygen. You've been poisoned." His eyes widened in recognition. "You're not supposed to be on this flight," he whispered. Mercer gave him a sharp look. "Neither was whatever took you down." Before Wright could respond, the aircraft's primary electrical system failed completely. The cockpit went dark for 3 seconds before emergency power engaged, bringing back minimal instruments. "Fix, we've got you," came Raptor Lee's steady voice. "In sight, 12 out. Follow us in." Through the windscreen, Mercer could see the fighter jet adjusting its position directly ahead, becoming her guide through the gathering dusk. Quadrillane Atoll appeared on the horizon, a thin strip of land in the vast Pacific, its runway lights already visible. The aircraft shuddered violently, another system failing, hydraulic pressure dropping. Landing was going to be even more challenging than she'd anticipated. "Octavia," Mercer called over the intercom. "Final preparation for emergency landing. 5 minutes." Throughout the cabin, flight attendants moved with practiced urgency, ensuring passengers were in brace positions. Somehow, word had spread that the mysterious pilot was military, a rumor that provided strange comfort in the crisis. As they began final approach, Mercer reached for the manual backup controls. Feeling the weight of 213 lives in her scarred hands, the aircraft responded sluggishly, like a wounded animal trying to obey commands through pain. "Runway in sight," she confirmed to Raptor. "Beginning approach, you're lined up perfect, Phoenix," the fighter pilot responded. Just like old times. Quadrillane's runway appeared larger now, emergency vehicles already positioned along its length. Military personnel stood ready. As they descended through 5,000 feet, another hydraulic system failed with a mournful alarm. "Landing gear showing inconsistent deployment," Mercer noted, her voice remaining steady despite the complication. "May need to come in wheels, uncertain." "Copy that." "Foam trucks are prepped and ready." In the cabin, Octavia braced in her jump seat, watching as the island grew larger through the windows. The passengers had gone silent. The only sound the chorus of "brace, brace" from the flight attendants. At 100 feet, Mercer made her final calculations. The crosswind was manageable. The remaining hydraulics would hold for touchdown. The real question was the landing gear. Sensors showed the nose gear might not be locked in position. 500 feet, she announced to the cabin. "Brace for impact." The fighters peeled away, their mission complete. Mercer was alone now, with her damaged aircraft and the lives entrusted to her care. The runway threshold passed beneath them, the concrete strip rushing up to meet the struggling Boeing. Main landing gear touched first, a harder bump than standard procedure, but controlled. The nose came down next, a moment of tension as weight transferred forward. The landing gear held. The aircraft decelerated rapidly, emergency braking systems deploying automatically as they rolled to a stop on the runway. Emergency vehicles converged from all directions. Inside the cabin, passengers began to cheer and weep with relief. But Mercer wasn't finished. "Everyone needs to evacuate immediately," she ordered through the intercom. "Possible toxic contamination. Leave all belongings behind and move quickly to emergency exits." Flight attendants sprang into action, deploying slides at all exits. Passengers moved with surprising order. The immediate danger of the flight now replaced with urgency to escape potential poison. Mercer remained in the cockpit, ensuring both incapacitated pilots had medical assistance before she would leave her post. As emergency personnel entered the cockpit, she finally surrendered the controls. On the tarmac, military personnel in hazmat gear directed passengers to quarantine areas. Medical teams triaged those showing respiratory symptoms. News of the emergency landing had already reached international media, with initial reports focusing on the mysterious fighter escort. Octavia found Mercer standing apart from the crowd, watching the efficient military response with professional assessment. The setting sun cast long shadows across the runway, highlighting the sharp angles of her face, a face no longer trying to blend in. The passengers are asking who saved them, Octavia said quietly. What should I tell them? Mercer's eyes remained on the aircraft. Tell them it was the training of the flight crew and the skill of emergency services. That's not the truth. It's the truth they need. Mercer turned to face Octavia fully. Your brother kept my secret for 5 years. Will you do the same? Before Octavia could answer, a black SUV screeched to a halt nearby. Four military personnel emerged, their bearing unmistakably official. The silver-haired man in the lead wore General stars on his shoulders. His weathered face registered surprise, then something like awe when he spotted Mercer. Phoenix, he said, approaching rapidly. Lazarus himself would be impressed. General Hargrove, Mercer acknowledged without warmth. Interesting coincidence, finding you at this remote base. Coincidence has nothing to do with it, the general replied. When authentication codes not used in 8 years suddenly appear on military channels, people notice. He glanced at the aircraft, then back at Mercer. Though I admit finding you alive is unexpected for me, as well some days. The general signaled to his staff, who moved to create a perimeter around them. We need to debrief immediately. The situation is more complex than you realize. Always is, Mercer replied. She turned to Octavia. You should rejoin your crew. They'll need your help with the passengers. Octavia hesitated. Will I see you again? Mercer's expression softened slightly. Probably not, but tell Wyatt that Phoenix says the debt is paid in full now. As Octavia walked away, she heard the general speaking in low, urgent tones. The toxin on that aircraft was military grade. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted that plane down, and they specifically wanted it to look like an accident. Why this flight? Mercer asked, her voice fading as distance grew between them. Because you were on it, came the general's reply before they disappeared into the waiting SUV. Dawn broke over Quadrillane at painting the military installation in shades of gold and amber. 20 hours had passed since Flight 863's emergency landing. The passengers had been cleared of toxic exposure after rigorous medical examinations, housed overnight in base accommodations, and were now being processed for continuation of their journey on a replacement aircraft. In a secure conference room overlooking the runway, Mercer Calloway stood at the window, watching the activity below. She had abandoned yesterday's civilian attire for standard-issue military fadings provided by the base. Without the careful camouflage of normality, her true bearing was unmistakable. The straight posture, the calculating gaze, the coiled readiness of someone who had spent decades in uniform. Behind her, General Hargrove reviewed documents on a tablet, occasionally glancing up at his resurrected operative. 2 intelligence officers sat silently at the far end of the table, recording every word. The toxin was a Russian derivative, Hargrove explained, setting down the tablet. Modified SVX-7 designed to incapacitate gradually rather than kill. The target was definitely the flight crew with secondary dispersal through the cabin air system. And your intelligence confirms I was the actual target. Mercer stated rather than asked. Someone went to extraordinary lengths to track your new identity. The question is who? Hargrove stood joining her at the window. Your death was confirmed at the highest levels. Yemen operation 8 years ago. Your body was identified by DNA analysis. Mercer's reflection in the glass showed no emotion. Clearly, someone was more thorough in their verification than our own people. We need to know how you survived Yemen, Colonel, and where you've been for 8 years. No, you don't. Mercer turned to face him directly. That operation was burned from the start. Someone wanted Phoenix erased. I simply gave them what they wanted. The general's weathered face hardened. You went dark without authorization. That's desertion. It's survival. The Yemen mission was a setup. My extraction team never arrived. Instead, I got a kill team wearing our uniforms. Mercer's voice remained controlled, but ICE had crept into it. Someone inside our organization wanted me eliminated. When they failed, I made sure they believed they'd succeeded. 8 years, Colonel, you could have made contact. With whom? The same chain of command that arranged for my execution. Mercer shook her head. I built a new identity, kept my head down until yesterday when someone else decided Phoenix needed to stay buried. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young lieutenant entered, saluting sharply. Sir, the passengers are requesting a meeting with Colonel Calloway before departure. The media presence is growing. CNN is reporting on the mystery pilot who saved Flight 863. Hargrove dismissed the lieutenant with a nod. This complicates things. It changes nothing, Mercer replied. Mercer Calloway died with the rest of Flight 863 in an unfortunate accident at sea. Maintenance failure. Tragic loss. That's not an option anymore. The general gestured toward the window. Below, several news vans had gathered at the perimeter, their satellite dishes aimed skyward. Too many witnesses. Too many phone recordings of those fighter escorts. The story is already viral. Mercer's jaw tightened. Then give them a different story. One that doesn't compromise national security or paint a target on anyone's back. Before Hargrove could respond, the door opened again. This time it was Octavia Reeves, still in her flight attendant uniform, though it was noticeably wrinkled after the ordeal. Excuse the interruption, she said, her eyes fixed on Mercer rather than the general. The passengers have organized an impromptu ceremony. They're requesting the presence of the pilot who saved them. That won't be possible, Hargrove began. But Mercer raised a hand to stop him. What kind of ceremony? Octavia straightened, addressing Mercer with formal respect. They want to thank you properly. Many have pieced together that you're military, though they don't know details, and there's someone special who wants to meet you, a retired Air Force colonel who recognized your voice on the recordings his wife took. Mercer and Hargrove exchanged glances. The situation was evolving beyond containment. I'll attend briefly, Mercer decided, but as a representative of the emergency response team, not as Phoenix. Hargrove side-eyed. I'll have public affairs prepare a statement. Colonel Mercer Calloway remains officially deceased. Whatever identity you've been using, stick with it. 30 minutes later, Mercer walked across the tarmac toward the assembled passengers. She had changed back into civilian clothes, though anyone with military experience would recognize her bearing instantly. The general had insisted on a security detail that maintained a discreet distance. The passengers had gathered near their replacement aircraft, an improvised podium set up using luggage crates. When Mercer approached, a ripple of recognition passed through the crowd. Whispers spread. Phones appeared, recording the moment. A middle-aged man stepped forward. The businessman from 27A. His previous complaints had been replaced by humility. On behalf of everyone from Flight 863, I want to express our profound gratitude, he announced, voice carrying across the assembled crowd. When both pilots were incapacitated and we were losing altitude, you stepped forward without hesitation. 213 lives were saved by your actions. Mercer nodded acknowledgement, but remained silent. We know you're military, the businessman continued. Some kind of special pilot. We respect that there are things you can't discuss, but we wanted you to know that what you did will never be forgotten. From the crowd, a silver-haired man in his 70s stepped forward, his posture unmistakably military despite his civilian clothes. He walked directly to Mercer and stopped 2 paces away. Colonel Everett Pierce, United States Air Force, retired, he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of command. Mercer's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. I was chief of flight testing at Edwards when you went through the program, Colonel Pierce continued, his voice lowered slightly. Never forgot your voice on the radio. Most natural pilot I ever certified. Without warning, Colonel Pierce snapped to attention and delivered a perfect military salute. The honor is mine, Phoenix. The crowd fell silent, witnessing the power of the moment without fully understanding its significance. Mercer returned the salute with precision, muscle memory from years of service taking over. The honor is mine, Colonel Pierce. One by one, other passengers approached. A mother with 2 young children who pressed hand-drawn thank you cards into Mercer's hands. an elderly couple who simply embraced her with tears in their eyes. The college student who had slept through most of the flight until the emergency, now solemnly shaking her hand. Octavia stood to the side, watching the procession with a mixture of pride and melancholy. This would be the last time Mercer Calloway, or whoever she really was, would be acknowledged for her actions. Tomorrow, the story would be sanitized, classified details scrubbed away, and Phoenix would disappear again. As the ceremony concluded, General Hargrove approached with a group of officers. His expression made clear that time was running out. "The aircraft is ready for boarding," he announced to the crowd. "If you'll begin making your way to the plane, we can get you to Honolulu before noon." As the passengers dispersed, Mercer found herself face to face with Octavia one final time. "Will you be continuing to Honolulu with us?" Octavia asked, though she clearly knew the answer. "No, I won't," Mercer replied. "My journey takes a different path from here." Octavia nodded, understanding the subtext. "My brother will be disappointed he missed you. Some ghosts are better left undisturbed." Mercer reached into her pocket and removed a small metal object, the unit pin Octavia had given her. "Keep this. It belongs with the living, not the dead. But my brother wanted you to have it. Tell him I carried it through the most important mission of my life, getting his sister home safely." The final boarding call came over the loudspeakers. Octavia hesitated, then impulsively embraced Mercer, an action that clearly caught the seasoned operative off guard. After a moment's hesitation, Mercer returned the gesture briefly before stepping back. "Safe travels, Octavia Reeves." "Goodbye, Phoenix." As Octavia boarded the replacement aircraft, Mercer turned to find General Hargrove waiting. "That was risky," he said, watching the passengers filing onto the plane. "Personal connections are vulnerabilities in your line of work." "My line of work ended 8 years ago in Yemen," Mercer replied. "Whatever identity you're about to create for me will be my fourth. At some point, General, you have to wonder what remains beneath all the call signs and cover stories." Hargrove studied her for a long moment. "What does remain, Colonel?" Mercer watched as the aircraft door closed, sealing Octavia and the passengers inside. "Duty. It's always been about duty. Then you understand why we need you back. Phoenix was our most successful deep cover operative for a reason. Your instincts, your adaptability, your particular skill set. They're irreplaceable. And now someone knows I'm alive, which makes me a liability, not an asset." The general shook his head. "On the contrary, it makes you bait." The replacement aircraft began taxiing toward the runway, carrying with it the last witnesses to Phoenix's resurrection. As it gained speed and lifted into the cloudless sky, Mercer watched it climb until it was merely a glint of metal against the blue. "So what happens now?" she asked finally. "Now we give you a choice," Hargrove replied. "Permanent retirement with a new identity on an island, so remote even I won't know its name. Or reactivation. Help us find who tried to bring down that aircraft and why they're so determined to eliminate Phoenix." "Those aren't the only options." Hargrove raised an eyebrow. "No, I could simply walk away, disappear again. I've gotten quite good at it." "You could," the general acknowledged. "But you won't." "Why not?" "Because someone targeted a civilian aircraft, 213 innocent people, to get to you." Hargrove's voice hardened, and Phoenix never leaves a mission unfinished. Mercer's eyes remained on the vanishing aircraft, now just a distant speck in the vast Pacific sky. For 8 years, she had built a life in the shadows, existing but never truly living. A ghost among the living, watching the world from row 27. "When do we start?" she asked finally. 3 days later, as Flight 863's replacement aircraft completed its journey to Honolulu, Octavia Reeves received a small package at her hotel. Inside was a simple note with coordinates and a time alongside a vintage aviation pin bearing the insignia of the Nighthawk Squadron, a unit officially listed as disbanded in 2015. The note contained only 5 words. "The mission isn't over yet." That evening, as passengers from Flight 863 were being interviewed by major news networks about their miraculous survival, Octavia slipped away from the media frenzy. She made her way to the coordinates provided, a small private airfield on the outskirts of Honolulu. Waiting on the tarmac was a nondescript private jet, its engines already running. At the foot of the boarding stairs stood a figure in the gathering dusk. Straight posture, calculated gaze, ready stance. Phoenix had risen once more. Subscribe to the Ordinary Heroes. Subscribe to the Ordinary Heroes.